All right, welcome back to another episode of Blown Coverage. Week 6 is upon us. Caleb, I think you would agree we have two big games this week, and everything else may be kind of a tier down in terms of big games, maybe kind of due for a letdown week after last week. Hard to, do that every single week, but that's why we appreciate weeks like the last one. Um, so, we talked before, and I think we both agree like the big games this week are Miami versus Florida State and Vanderbilt versus Alabama. And college game day really had, the same two choices. It was going to be one of those two games. They chose Vanderbilt versus Alabama. Do you agree with that decision? Do you think that's the game of the week, or would you have gone elsewhere?
mm, Gone elsewhere. But I think the reason why they didn't is because I think game day was at Miami. I don't think it was last weekend, but maybe when they played Notre Dame.
I think
And
2 weeks ago versus Florida.
okay,
And that
so
was criticized at the time because there were other big games that week.
yeah, I remember that. I mean, for this week, if you're going, and they probably just chose the Vanderbilt Alabama game because of them just being in Coral Gables a couple weeks prior. So I guess with that in mind, like yes, obviously should game day be at the Miami FSU game over the Alabama Vanderbilt game for sure. But they probably chose it just because they were there a couple weeks prior and they always like to go to new places or whatever. So it is what it
Yeah,
is.
I understand. My thing is, you just said new places. I mean, they go
Or
to
different.
Alabama
Yeah.
plenty, and I feel like when is your next opportunity and when was your last opportunity to be at a big game at Florida State whenever both those two teams are in the top 10? I was listening to, I guess it was Chris Fowler talk about how, look, they aren't going to go to the game that's just the highest ranked matchup. They're going for the story. And I get that. Alabama has a great story to it right now, rebounding out off that week one loss. Vanderbilt is kind of the feel good story of the SEC or of college football. Plenty to talk about there. My thing is FSU. Yes, they're coming off a loss. Obviously, if they would have won the game, I think that is where game they would have been. If they would have won the game last week. But still, I think it's such a big game for both teams. But for Florida State, as we'll talk about, I think it's kind of a must win for them. Whereas Alabama, it's like, it's an interesting game, but I kind of feel this could be a lopsided affair. We'll get into that. My personal opinion is they should be at Florida State, not Alabama. But with that said, they are going to Alabama. So I say that's the first game we cover. That's going to be on ABC at 2:30 Saturday. And yeah, so what are your initial thoughts on this one?
I think it'll be a very interesting game. I'll kind of get into it, but in a nutshell, I think at the end of the day, I I give Vanderbilt a puncher's chance. Okay. Uh, I think Alabama has had this marked on the calendar for quite a while. Um, so ever since last year when Vandy beat Alabama 40-35 last year in Vanderbilt, how many people would have thought going into that game Vandy would have won? Not many. I mean, maybe like 3% of Americans. I don't know. Um, but anyway, it's just very interesting this matchup because I think the key thing is going to be the run game on both sides of the ball. Vanderbilt's offense is a very good team rushing the ball, and Diego Pavia is a great dual threat quarterback. He can throw when he needs to. He can also run the ball very effectively, and that's exactly what gives Alabama's defense gives them fits basically. So Vanderbilt has a top 20 rush offense, and while Alabama has a 90th ranked run defense. So it's going to be very interesting to see how effective Vanderbilt's run game can be against the Alabama defense. If Alabama shows up and they plug in holes, it can make it a long day for the Vanderbilt offense because, yes, Diego Pavia is a really good quarterback, but maybe his Achilles tendon is whenever you put him in situations that he is required to just basically pass and not necessarily have the run game to fall back on if needed be. Um, so that's kind of the route I would take it for Vanderbilt on the offensive side. The defensive side for them, I would probably say just don't allow Ty Simpson to get into a rhythm. Alabama's run game has been not very good at all. It's good enough for them just to get by, basically. But where Alabama has been fantastic is just not turning the ball over, and their defense is creating turnovers. They're number one in the nation as far as the turnover margin. They're +7. So basically, Ty Simpson's not turning the ball over, throwing it to them, and or throwing it to defenses, and their defense is getting turnovers. Their running backs aren't um, losing the ball. So basically, Vandy's defense is going to have to force some turnovers to win this game and get off the field on third down. Um, on their offense, again, a key thing was for last year, they converted 12 out of 18 times on third down, 66% conversion rate on third down. That, I mean, which is really good, especially against an Alabama defense. Okay. If they want to have any sort of success in this game, they're going to have to definitely replicate that. They're going to have to convert on third down, and they're going to have to make Alabama's defense stay out there and keep Alabama's offense off the field. Um, Diego Pavia, he's got a great completion percentage at 74.6. He's got 1,211 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. And uh, I don't know, can just do a lot. And Ty Simpson, on the other hand, has 69% or 69.3 completion percentage, 11 touchdowns, 0 interception. Basically, I think the keys for Alabama to win this game: don't turn the ball over, control Diego Pavia, and have some sort of a run game, not to just put all the eggs in the basket on Ty Simpson. Um, so it'll be interesting. What it will boil down to is honestly is the run game. Um, both sides, Alabama's defense, Vandy's offense, and Alabama's offense. So it'll be interesting. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I really agree with pretty much everything you said. I think this is an interesting spot in that we forget last year that when Vandy shocked the world and they beat Alabama, I don't remember if Vandy was Alabama's first loss of the season, but I do know that it was coming off that Georgia win last year when Alabama beat Georgia. And that's why nobody saw that win coming from Vandy.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, look, first of all, it's Vandy, but second of all, it's Alabama just beating Georgia. They should be sky high. They're rolling. Similar spot here, but there's a major difference. Two major differences. One, Alabama's at home this time.
Mm-hmm.
Two, Alabama's had this game circled. Hey, we lost to Vanderbilt last year. People won't stop talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
So this time, I think they know, like, hey, we can't be caught off guard here.
Yep.
And to me, I agree with you. I think the matchup to watch is Pavia and just the Vanderbilt run game in general versus Alabama's defense. That has been Alabama's weakness. Georgia rushed for 227 yards last week on the ground. If Vandy can do that, then they'll stay in this game. You got to know that Alabama's going to be ready for that game plan. They know that's kind of Pavia's game. I don't think Pavi is going to win this game through the air. He's going to have to be able to run the ball. And
Yep.
I could definitely see a world where Alabama kind of just shuts that down and the feel good story is kind of over. I just feel like it's a good spot for Alabama. I don't think there's going to be any sort of hangover versus Georgia. They know they can't afford to do that.
Yep.
And look, Vanderbilt 5-0. Give them credit. First 5-0 start since 2017 under Clark Lee. Their offense is legit. They're averaging over 31 points a game, and
Yep.
those are legitimate points. But you've got an Alabama team that's been a lot more battle tested at this point. Florida State, Wisconsin, even though Wisconsin isn't great, but it's still a Power Four school. Vanderbilt, yes, they had South Carolina. South Carolina doesn't look the best. They've had Utah State, and they've had somebody else that wasn't that good. So, Georgia State. But Vanderbilt has been putting up points, so I think that's going to have to be their saving grace. Second half dominance. They're leading the nation in 24 points per game in the second half. That's Vanderbilt I'm talking about. So that's what they're going to have to do to keep this close. And I also agree with you. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Simpson does versus Vandy's secondary, or maybe I should say how Vandy's secondary does versus Simpson, because Alabama is going to want to air the ball out, and Vandy has the 55th ranked pass defense, and they struggled last week against Utah State. So putting all that together in the spot, it's game day. Alabama's going to be focused. The line has actually come down. In the beginning of the week, it was 14 and a half
Yep. Hmm.
Alabama side. It's come down to 10 and a half,
Hmm.
which I find interesting. I listened to Josh Pate say, you think this isn't as big of a game because you still are putting Vanderbilt in your mind as how they typically have been, but the way you need to think about Vanderbilt is think of them as Michigan. If Michigan were going to Alabama, how would you look at this game? You would think, well, Alabama should win, but I could see how it'd be close. I get that. I just don't believe in Vanderbilt. To me, I think it's too much for them to overcome, and I will be shocked if Vandy has, as you said, a puncher's chance by the time we get to the fourth quarter. But I am excited to watch it. So that's kind of my analysis on the game.
Yeah. I think Vanderbilt has a puncher's chance. Now, I can see it going two ways here. I think it can be a very competitive game, and then Alabama pulls out in the fourth quarter. Um, I think that's probably the most likely version, or Alabama's just going to come out from the get go and just beat the brakes off of them, which I could also see them, but I think Vanderbilt's going to give them enough fits in the run game to. Because basically, what will happen is Vanderbilt's going to have to just control the clock, eat the clock away, run the ball a lot, uh, probably score on the majority of their possessions, and basically try to do what they can on defense, just to not allow Ty Simpson to get in a passing rhythm and score touchdowns. We'll see though, but now that we're saying all this, it'll probably be a defensive game, and it'll be a 9-6 victory or something. I don't know, not really,
Yep.
but it'll be interesting because it could go either way. Really and truly, I think so. I would not be surprised either way if it was competitive until the fourth quarter, or Alabama just beats the brakes off of them.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, moving on to our second game now, Florida State, or I should say Miami at Florida State. This game is going to be at 6:30, also on ABC. I kind of want to start us out here. I have a lot to say about the game, and as I dug into the game more, I became more and more fascinated by this game. It's obviously and obviously it's a big game, right? Like I don't need to say that, but let me ask you this: right now, do you project in your mind that Florida State will be in the playoffs?
I want to say yes. I think it'd be on the cusp.
Okay,
I think it'd be on the
I
cusp.
I agree, and that's the way I've always looked at it too. But this is really a must-win game for Florida
Oh, for
State
sure. Yeah, if they were to
because
lose this, their chances would be very slim to be,
right,
because the
right.
Virginia game is going to hurt them unless Virginia just goes on an unbeknownst like run, and I think they already have one loss, but they go 11-1 or something like that.
Yes.
Is that likely though?
So yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, and I'll get maybe more of this at kind of the end of the analysis, but if they lose this game, they're not going to be in the ACC championship most likely. And not only are they not going to be in that, there's a good chance they're fourth place in the ACC. The
Yeah.
way that the schedules line up, because they're going to be 0 and 2. And the people above them, the teams above them, Georgia Tech and Virginia, right now they're undefeated, and Louisville. Louisville's also undefeated in the ACC. And their schedules are so where they don't. Louisville faces Miami, Georgia Tech does not, and I'm sorry, and Virginia does not. There's a great chance those teams can run the table or even get away with one loss. Florida State, if they lose this game, they're going to have two losses in the ACC. So they're not going to probably get another opportunity to just get like a great win. So I think if they lose, it's very likely that they're not in the playoff at all, which is just crazy considering how we thought about them just a week ago. So I find this game very fascinating just from a spot standpoint. From a spot standpoint as well, Miami coming off a bye, which
Mhm.
gives Miami maybe somewhat of an advantage. FSU has won 5 of the last 7 against Miami in Tallahassee at Florida State. So, I think that's interesting. The home field advantage for Florida State there. Um, Also, as I said earlier, this is the first top 10 clash between these two since 2013. So I think, or I should say, it should have been the first top 10 clash between them since 2013 before Florida State lost their game to Virginia. But key matchup for me here, Florida State's offense, even in their loss to Virginia, has been amazing. I believe they're first in the country in points. And
And yards per
going
game.
against and yards per game. And what's going to be interesting is Miami's defense has been
Yeah.
very elite to this point.
Yep.
And that Notre Dame win is looking better and better because Notre Dame, no one's been able to stop their offense. But if you watch that game, Notre Dame scored 24 points, but really held them in check most of the game. They've made a lot
Hmm.
of defenses just look silly. FSU's offense really hasn't been stopped yet. So to me, that's going to be kind of the matchup to watch. Both teams are top 20 in finishing drives offensively. Both defenses kind of struggle to actually close out drives. So when they're in the red zone, both defenses tend to kind of give it up a bit. I think that's going to have to be Florida State's hope. Is they're going to have like a crazy good offensive performance
Yep.
and
It'll
maybe
be hard to
force
do.
Miami. Yeah, and maybe force Miami to do something they haven't all year, and that is play from behind. Miami hasn't really had to do that. They've played the game kind of at their own pace. And I've said before, I think I said it on our last podcast or the one before, I think Miami will go as far as Carson Beck takes them because that
Yep.
defense is elite, no doubt. Carson Beck's been pretty good. But if he stumbles, I could absolutely see a way Florida State wins this game because, again, that Florida State offense is very, very good. I do think this will end up being maybe a higher scoring game than people think because, like I said, I know Miami's defense has been very good, but I think Florida State's offense is also very legit. Obviously, their quarterback has that dual threat ability, and I don't think you just hold a team down like that that's been scoring so well to like under 20. So,
Yeah.
last thing I want to say about it is Miami could also be looking at this. Obviously, it's a rivalry game coming off a bye at Florida State, but there's a not outside the realm of possibility that if Miami loses this game, they're not in the ACC championship. Because I'm telling you, the way these ACC schedules are built, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Virginia have very easy schedules going forward.
Mhm.
If those teams run the table and Florida State were to have the tiebreaker over Miami, there's a decent chance Miami doesn't make the ACC championship game. So the loser of this game, uh, really needs to play well after the fact. So yeah, that's kind of my analysis. I guess to finish up, I do think Miami is going to probably pull it off. I think they're just one of the best teams in the nation. But that's really all I have to say about it.
I think it'll be a competitive game. I think what it will come down to, uh, it, yes, in this instance, I have to really agree with you and say that Miami has the edge. They'll pull it off. I think it'll be a competitive game. We'll kind of see. I think what it will boil down to for Florida State is, can they pass the ball? Okay, so they're number one in points, yards per game. Okay, and they are running the ball very very well. They're number two running offense in the country. Okay, Miami's defense is the number eight running defense in the country, and they're only allowing 11.5 points per game. Okay, and like you just said, they played Notre Dame, which is a very, very good offense that just scored 56 points against Arkansas. That's ninth in the country, by the way, 11.5 points per game. Uh, an interesting little tidbit fact here is 21% of the run plays against Miami's defense has been 0 yards or less. So in other words, one out of every five running plays against Miami's defense, you're going to go for 0 yards or lose, go behind the line of scrimmage. So I think that'll be very interesting. Now, do I think Miami's defense can completely stop Florida State's run game? Probably not. We'll just see how effective they can be at plugging the holes and see what Gus Malzone can scheme up and whatnot. But can they pass the ball? Is the question that I have. If they can, it's going to be very tricky. Now, up to this point, the only really play threat that they have in the wideout area for Florida State has been Deuce Robinson, which I believe when he came into the football scene, he was a five-star tight end at USC, and then he transferred over to Florida State. Now he's a wide receiver, and he's been very good. He's got like 360-something yards in receiving up to this point, and all the other wide receivers on the team have like around 100. Okay, so he's like got three times the production. So really, Florida State's got one playmaker at the wideout position. It's going to make it very easy for Miami's defense to kind of zero in on him, and just I'm not saying it's going to be easy because Castellanos is very mobile, and I mean he can run it, he can pass it, and he can scramble very well. So I'm not saying it will be easy, but I don't know. I'll probably have to give the edge to Miami's defense. And like you said, Carson Beck will take Miami as far, or he'll be the limiting factor on how far Miami can go this year. Up to this point, I think he has around 7 passing touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So, and they've played like what, 4 games? I can't remember, 4 or 5 games.
4 games,
Okay?
yeah.
And that's really not a good touchdown to interception ratio, to be honest with you. Um, it's I don't know. I guess you could say slightly above average, but we'll see how he does. We'll see how he does. Florida State's defense hasn't been the worst, hasn't been the best. We'll see how they show up on Saturday.
Agreed. One other quick stat: Florida State 20-3 at home since 2022. So it's not going to be an easy environment. Carson
That's
Beck got
very
tested on the road
that's
this
actually a
season.
little surprising considering how bad they were last year. Honestly,
It's so surprising. I'm wondering if that stat is right. Actually, I may have to double check that. That may not be true, but I have it here.
I think they went
Uh,
3-9 last year, so I don't know.
yeah, that's
Maybe the games that they won were at home. I don't know.
yeah. I'm gonna say that's actually not true. I mean, I guess it could be.
It
They could
could
have
be
gone like three and
because
three at home.
the year before, I think they was that the year that they were like undefeated until
They
the
were
Georgia
really good.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
Very interesting. We have some other good matchups though this weekend. I mean, like you said at the beginning of the podcast. I mean, compared to last week, I mean it's nowhere near that. But I think there's like two huge games, and then lower tier. I still think it's going to be good quality football, but as far as implications go and stuff like that, I don't know. It doesn't really compare to the two games we've talked about. So, which of those matchups would you like to go into first?
just real quick, I had to see if I was right about the if they were 20-3 at home. Last year they had one, two, three, four, five, six losses at home. So I make
Okay.
that five losses at home. So clearly that stat was not right. So ignore that. So what games am I going to be eyeing for this week? I think there's a few that are fascinating. Just going off the last game we talked about, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on either one of these teams, but I think it has a playoff implications and ACC championship implications, and that is going to be Virginia versus Louisville. Virginia looked very good last week, obviously beating Florida State, but they were at home, and teams do play different on the road compared to at home. And now Virginia is going to get other teams' best shots. Uh, the loser of this game, it's going to be pretty tough for them to do anything going forward. Louisville is undefeated. They're 6.5 point favorites, which I find fascinating, being that Virginia just beat Florida State. Uh, but they are the home team. Louisville is one of those teams that's always pretty good, but not great. I guess this is their first, somewhat major test. So, like I said, I'm not an expert on the teams. I don't know who the quarterback is for Louisville. I haven't watched Louisville
That's the only
play.
thing I know about this match. Well, actually, there's two things. Chandler, oh God. Okay, well, I know the quarterback for Virginia is the transfer from TCU, and the quarterback for Louisville is transfer from USC. Dylan Moss, I think, is his name. Which he was pretty
Okay.
decent. I mean, and very well could be the reason why. But to be honest with you, very
Yeah.
surface level with that game.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. So the thing is, Louisville, they have this game versus Virginia. If they win it, they have Miami next week at Miami. So probably a loss, but they can probably get away with one loss. But I think in this conference, you can only have one. So, like I said, same thing for Virginia. So to me, uh, this could be a game to decide who is that second spot in the ACC championship. Georgia Tech's obviously going to be the favorite right now. They are the favorite. Miami's the favorite to win. The second is Georgia Tech, just because their schedules they just line up. Uh, but I think this is a fascinating game, especially if Virginia wins. Now you really have to start talking about Virginia as a playoff team. They don't have a hard schedule at all. Looking at it here, they have at Louisville, they've already beat Florida State, and they don't have to face Miami. And like I said, they'll be undefeated in the conference. So, yeah, the ACC is fascinating, and I could just see at the end of the year that causing just some chaos, between that 11 and 12th spot of like, okay, because are you really going to put in three ACC teams whenever you're going to have other options from the SEC and the Big Ten?
Big Ten,
I,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah. So it's going to be fascinating. Like I said, especially if Miami happens to lose, it's just going to be wide open in terms of not who the best team is, because Miami's probably the best team, but who's going to actually be in that ACC championship. And that's going to have implications on the playoffs because they're going to be like, as they talked about last year, okay, do we leave the loser of the championship game out of the playoffs? Well, in this case, like maybe so because of the way the schedules are just set up. Like, let's face it, some schedules are easier than others. So if Miami ends up facing a team like Virginia or Louisville, whoever, it just blows doors. It's like, yeah, I could see leaving off like the second place team in the ACC, but maybe not. But anyway, I think that's a fascinating game.
For sure. Maybe we could do a couple more like rapid fire type things on some other games. The game I probably will jump into next for us is probably the Florida and Texas game. This being played at Florida. I wish I had my phone, and honestly, here in a second, I may have to go grab my phone to go pull up the stat because last week we talked about Drew Aller a little bit in his game against Oregon, and anyway, this will be a very interesting game because it will be the best test that Arch has faced faced since the Ohio State defense. Which, by the way, I really do think the Ohio State defense is fantastic. And I think Florida's defense is pretty good too. But Arch has played against little cream puff teams, since the Ohio State game. Now he had his arguably his best game um, 2 weeks ago against Sam Houston. However, it's against Sam Houston, so I'm very interested to see how he responds. Coming off the bye week, extra preparation. I'll be interested to see how he's able to deal with the stadium, the noise, because that is a pretty loud stadium, pretty good atmosphere for college football. Um, in that matchup, I'm actually not even necessarily sure DJ Lagway's situation. I don't know if he's going to be playing or not. Regardless, if he is or not, though, I mean, you just can't. Do I trust the Longhorns defense more than I do Florida's offense? Yes, I do. I think Texas has one of the better defenses in the nation, probably maybe top five potentially at the end of the year. Um, so that's kind of why I would maybe give the edge to Texas, because I know up to this point Arch has been rocky. He's been rocky, but with him coming off his best game, I hope that he has momentum and carries that into this week. And I just think Texas defense will be too much for that Florida offense. What are your thoughts on that game?
Agreed. It's definitely one I'm gonna have on the TV on a side screen probably because I think this has the potential. It could just be like an ugly game, like a 13-9 type of game,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
it's just like neither team could score. The thing is, I think Texas. I think they have the second best defense in the country, behind
yeah,
Ohio State. And like, yeah, I don't know what Lagway's gonna do. So actually, both teams are coming off a bye week this week, so you can't even give an edge to either one for that. But I actually would still give a slight advantage to Texas because they have Steve Sarkisian, and I think he's a great coach, and I could see him just having a great game plan offensively for Arch. Like, hey, this is what we're gonna do versus Florida's defense. Now you can't you know, Florida's defense is legit too. I don't know where I'd rank them, but it's a good defense.
hmm
So I think that is going to be fascinating for Arch. His first road environment since that Ohio State game has
yeah.
a chance to really silence the haters. Uh, Also has a chance to strengthen their voice. If he
Yeah,
really messes
exactly.
up.
That's why I say, like, as a Texas fan, it's a huge game for us because this
Yeah.
arguably will kind of set the tone for how our season will go. Like, oh crap, we're
Yeah.
actually facing some really good opponents. What's going to be the, are we going to be able to compete offensively? Now, defensively, I know we can, but offensively, can we? So it'll be interesting for sure. I think the
Well,
good.
Well, I was just going to say, Florida is kind of they've been in a must win situation, but every week it just gets more dire. And I would
Specifically, Billy
say,
Napier, I think, he's almost got to be like kind of in the corner.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's a must win situation, but I feel like this is kind of their last stand. If they lose this
Exactly. Yeah.
game, they're 0-2 in the SEC. And I think it's going to be hard for their players to play hard every week, knowing that okay, we're 1-4 now, and the next game's at Kyle Field. So for that reason, like I just think it's really fascinating. I do still give the edge to Texas, mostly just because of their defense and their coaching advantage. I would say they have. I think it's going to be an ugly game, and I think it is going to be like a 13-9 type thing. But I could see a very realistic scenario where Arch Manning, I don't think he's going to light the world on fire, but I could see him looking competent and being like, okay, you're starting to find a rhythm now. So that's kind of my final thoughts on the
And
game.
frankly, that's all we really need him to be this year is just competent in not turning the ball over. And honestly, we'll be just fine if he can do that consistently for us. Um, we'll see what he can do. I mean, Steve Sarkisian's one of the best play callers in the nation. So, if anyone can kind of help their young quarterback through a troubling time, it's him. So I think another great game that we need to briefly discuss. It's not necessarily like there's one ranked team, but I think A&M and Mississippi State. If you'd like to kind of dive into that a little bit, I think that's under the radar game because I think Mississippi State up to this point, not a lot of people are maybe keeping their eye on them yet.
Yeah, I think. as we talked about in the last show, Mississippi State, their over/under win total for the year was 3.5. They're at 4. If they could have pulled off that win versus Tennessee, this
Oh
would just
man.
be it would have a lot more spotlight, obviously, because it would be a ranked matchup. Even now, Mississippi State is like ranked 27th. If you're counting the extra votes and stuff. The thing is, and I think I don't know if this was fake news, but I think I saw their quarterback might be out for this game, Mississippi State. So
Blake
I'm not.
Sharpen or Shapen or whatever.
I saw the headline. I don't know if it was true, but I saw the headline. Regardless, maybe you can look that up while I'm talking and let me know. But regardless, I think this is just a bad spot for Mississippi State. You're facing an A&M team that offensively just got done not performing well, and I think they want to make a statement. It's now a night game at Kyle Field, and it's actually a blackout game. And so we're wearing all black, A&M is, and I think the players are going to be hyped up. I think Mississippi State's hope is that they can maybe move the ball on our defense, which hasn't been perfect. It was great last weekend. I don't know if that's exactly who A&M is defensively, but I guess we'll see. This will be kind of a test for that defense because I think they can pass the ball a little bit more or a little bit better than Auburn. But last I saw the spread was at 14, which seems like a big spread whenever you're talking about like Mississippi State, like they performed well. And I think it's been legitimate. I mean, look, they just nearly did beat Tennessee. They did beat the number 12 team in the country, Arizona State. But those games were at home, and being on the road is so different. Uh, Whenever in
Night
college
game too.
football,
Yeah.
especially in a night game blackout. And I'm telling you, after that offensive performance from A&M, I do think they're going to want to make a statement. I kind of think, and I'm usually not that confident, in my teams because I have the nerves. I would kind of be surprised if this was a close game. I kind of think A&M is going to blow doors. Um, yeah, so I
Let's
think
say on
this
the
could be
flip
all.
side, what do you think the storylines would be if Mississippi State upset you guys?
Well, there would be two storylines. I mean, obviously, A&M losing, it would kind of take them out of, people have been putting them in this top 10, even top 5 picture in the rankings, which I don't necessarily agree with as far as the top 5 because I think A&M still has a lot to prove, and them losing that game in this spot would be like, okay, A&M's just not there yet. Look at their opponents, look at their road opponents ahead. They're clearly not a legitimate playoff team. That'd be the A&M angle. But the alternate angle would also be forget about A&M. Mississippi State is just legit. They barely lost to Tennessee. They beat the number 12 team in the country, and then they just beat what are we ranked now? The number 6
Six.
team in the country on the road at night at Kyle Field. That would be an incredible story. Um, I just don't see it happening.
They'd be one game away from being bowl eligible, which will be like very good whenever Jeff Levy is able to do that. It's second year being the head coach there. And, frankly, Mississippi State has not really had too much success since Dan Mullen left, right? So just getting bowl eligible is a pretty good goal to have for them to complete. And they're pretty much
Agreed.
almost there.
Agreed. Just quickly, I just want to go over their schedule because you're talking about bowl eligibility. It's just a tough road for some of these SEC teams. Maybe Texas will eventually get it next year when they actually do have a somewhat tough schedule in the SEC. But Mississippi State after Tennessee, so now it's at A&M, at Florida, which it's a tough game because it's at Florida. They host Texas, at Arkansas, host Georgia, at Missouri, host Ole Miss. I only see. Oh, you know what? I may not see any wins. Maybe at Arkansas, maybe at Florida, but you got to go on the road and beat those teams. Like it just sucks for them because they might be good, but like who are they going to beat? I guess we'll see. Maybe they're more competitive with A&M than I think, and they're in some of these games, but they kind of have a rough schedule.
I think it is kind of crazy how they beat the 12th team in the nation. They barely lost to the 15th team in the nation, and they're at least not even ranked. I mean, you could put them
Oh
at
yeah,
25,
oh
arguably,
yeah.
because their only loss is to the number 15 team in the country, and that was like in I forgot how many overtimes, either one or two. And anyway, I think that was kind of insane. Did you have any other games that you wanted to kind of briefly discuss?
I don't think there's any specific game I want to watch. I'm just going to name a few games that I'll be eyeing. The 11 a.m. window is kind of, there's not going to be a lot on. It's more about the 2:30 window this week, and then the night window
I
is
will
the Florida
say, now
State.
that you say the 11 o'clock slot, I do
Mhm.
see the Clemson and UNC game. I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, frothing at the mouth to watch it by any means, but I don't know. It could be very interesting. I mean, what kind of storylines would there be with Bill Belichick beating Dabo Sweeney? I mean, goodness gracious, could you imagine the storylines for Dabo if he went 1-4? Oh
Yeah.
man, there that game's kind of interesting because of where the storylines could be. As far as like Dabo is, what's going to happen to Dabo? I would really feel bad if
Yeah.
they lost. Uh,
Uh,
Goodness.
Agreed. 14-point spread on that game. I actually don't think that game's going to be competitive. I think North Carolina looks absolutely awful. I know Clemson's looked awful, but I think North Carolina's been a different level of awful.
Who knows?
So,
Maybe Bill Belichick is like, I don't know, like put some Adderall in like the North Carolina players' breakfast or something, and like they're just extra focused this week. Who knows? I have no idea.
yeah.
Um,
But
it'll be
but we'll
interesting.
see. But just to go back to what I was saying, I'm not going to go over any of these games necessarily, but just quickly, I want to see how Georgia responds this week. They've got Kentucky at home. I expect that to be a
And that
blowout.
could be a sneaky
Uh,
game too. Bob Stoops, great,
maybe,
or Mark Stoops, excuse me,
maybe.
not Bob Stoops, Mark Stoops.
Yeah, yeah. Big 12 implications, Iowa State versus Cincinnati. Now, this is interesting because Iowa State, number 14 in the country, I've watched them. I haven't been that impressed with them.
Yeah,
At Cincinnati, Cincinnati is favored 1.5. So that's a game to keep an eye on. That's
Iowa
going to have
State's
Big
probably
12
around
implications.
12 or something,
They're
13,
14.
14. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that game. That's really kind of it for the 12 o'clock window. 2:30, you have the Texas Florida game, Vanderbilt, Alabama, Boise State, Notre Dame. I just like to watch Notre Dame at this point. You also have
Yeah.
yeah, 2:30 is going to have some good games. Virginia, Louisville, uh, and that's kind of it there. And then 3 o'clock, I'll be watching just because I kind of like watching these for whatever reason, middling Big Ten teams to see if there's any separation. But Michigan State versus Nebraska, I think both teams are trying to get to maybe that second tier of the Big Ten, and they both need to win this game
Well,
if they're
that's
going
not
to.
saying much either. Trying like getting into the
It's
second
not,
tier of the Big Ten because the top tier of the Big Ten is, I mean, you could argue is the cream of the crop. So,
for
but
sure,
yes,
for
you're
sure.
exactly right. Two programs trying to get things in the right way, and I don't know. That'll be an interesting game for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And then lastly, Texas Tech at Houston.
Yeah.
11.5 point spread on this. I think Texas Tech is just way better than Houston. I know Houston's undefeated. They haven't really faced anybody. Connor Wigman, former Aggie, the
Hmm.
quarterback at Houston. But I think Texas Tech is a legitimately great team, but they still kind of need to prove that. And to prove that, they need to blow out Houston, a team like Houston. So, but that's what it's like. Would it shock me if you just see like a crazy upset? Because the Big 12, like crazy things happen. It's
Yep.
like, okay, I guess Texas Tech wasn't as good as we thought. So that's one to keep an eye on. But that's just
What
kind
time
of
was
my
that
rapid
game?
fire. What's up?
What time was that game?
That's at 6.
Oh wow. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the 6:30 window, really, there's not a lot there. You have the Florida State
Other than the
game
Florida, yeah.
at
Oh well,
Houston.
dude. You got the Florida State Miami game. You got the Mississippi State Texas A&M game. I'm not sitting here saying like that the Mississippi State Texas A&M game is going to be like one of the best of the weekend, but interesting matchup. Once again,
Yeah.
some of the better games are like all at the same time again.
Yeah, yeah. Which is more of a problem for you since you only watch on one screen. But I'll be watching them all, and I'm excited to do so. But I guess for you, it kind of sucks because your game's at 2:30, the Texas game, and all the other ones you want to watch are also at 2:30. So
Mm, yeah,
that is a
I
little.
mean, I think yeah, the only other game I would want to watch at 2:30 is the Vanderbilt Alabama game, probably. And I mean, I probably would want to keep tabs on the Louisville Virginia game, just I don't know, to some degree. I'd want to keep an eye on it, but really, it's the 6 o'clock window. As I mean, that's when all the best games are on, typically every weekend. But
This
anyway,
is interesting. I'm just now seeing this. The line on the Texas game has moved from 6.5 down to 4.5. And
mm,
there's a lot of people picking Florida to win this game outright. So I think that it really is going to be a fascinating game. You were talking about storylines for the A&M game.
hmm
There's a lot of storylines that could happen on this Texas Florida game.
oh, for sure, yeah. I
Is
was kind of
is
hinting at it, like
Florida
saying
wins?
like
Are
it's
they back?
yeah.
But, but yeah, that's kind of my thoughts for the upcoming week. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Um,
Talk about?
I don't think so. I mean, I think to wrap it up, I mean, is this going to be one of the best weekends of college? Well, actually, and really and truly, we won't know until afterwards, because, it could just be like another weekend where a lot of games are going to overtime or, coming down to the last seconds. And if that's the case, then, I mean, at the end of the day, that's great football, and that's all we're here for. But I don't know. It'll be hard to beat last week, but we'll see. We'll see. It's college
Let me
football.
ask you this before we leave. Of the games we've kind of talked about, and it can be even the rapid fire games we kind of looked at, just briefly, what team do you think is most likely to pull off the upset this week?
Hmm. Interesting. I'd maybe go Louisville just because, like, Virginia's
Louisville's the
right in.
favorite.
Oh, they are. Okay, that's
Yes, at
interesting.
home minus 6.5. Yeah,
Hmm. Okay, well, if that's the case, then I'll do Virginia.
yeah. Okay, I
Well,
agree. I agree because that's one of those that could be just like a mispriced
yeah, I
line.
think
We
I
don't
think it's a
know how
toss-up
either of those
game.
teams.
Yeah, I think it's a
Yeah.
toss-up game to begin with. And I figured like with Virginia just being like 24th, I figured Louisville being unranked, I figured Virginia would have been favored or whatever. But anyway, all right, I picked them.
Okay. All right, fair choice. I was thinking about going Florida, but something tells me again, as I was saying with the coaching staffs, I just think Texas is going to be ready. I'm actually just going to go with maybe a cliche pick, but not that cliche. I mean, Miami's been the best team in the country, so choosing against them would be an upset. I will go Florida State as the most likely, not necessarily choosing them, but the most likely for the upset, just because of the spot. They gotta win, and yeah, it's college football. We're gonna see chaos. It might as well start now. So that would
Yeah,
be my.
man, and that would be wild too if Florida State took down Miami. That would be absolutely
Where do
insane.
you rank those teams if Florida State wins? Because Florida State has two of the best wins in the country, Alabama and
Yeah.
Miami, but then they have this loss to Virginia.
Uh
And
huh.
then it's like, well, where do you rank Miami? So
I
it's
don't know. Maybe if Virginia
I
pulls
don't know.
out against Louisville, though, that
Yeah,
depending on how Virginia does the next couple weeks, I mean, that maybe wouldn't look like a horrible loss for
right.
Florida State. That might be a stretch too, but um, yeah, that's a good question. Hmm. We'll see
I guess
what
we'll have to
Sunday
wait and
entails.
see.
Do
Yeah,
what?
I say I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, yeah. Don't forget that Arch can use his legs and run, though. Not saying that. I mean, and he may actually have to use them to win.
Yeah,
And I don't
yeah.
necessarily
Well,
disagree with the point spread coming down to 4 either, because, like you said, I could see it being an ugly game. Like I either see Arch Manning continue to be efficient and do great things like a lot of people expected him to do from the get go and not really have any hiccups or whatever. Although I think it is a little absurd to have that expectation, but if he's able to go out and do that, I mean that would be awesome. I could see it like a two pathways is he could come out and do that and we handily beat Florida, or he has more hiccups, and it's just a defensive battle in a war of attrition. And at that point, I would have to give Texas the edge still because we just have more playmakers than Florida does, and just deeper overall team. So anyway, it'll be an interesting week.
Agreed. Agreed. All right. Well, I say we wrap it up there. Call it quits. Thank you for listening to another episode of Blown Coverage. Caleb, I will see you next week.
Yes, see you next week. Thank you guys for tuning in.